All right, so next we need to figure out the bridge position. So it is probably going to be somewhere around there. Let's have a look. So 25.5. So our scale length is 25.5. Then we're going to check with a straight edge along our fretboard. Like so. Because it's pine, I'm really trying not to press down almost that hole. Then using the bradawl. So that is first and foremost, need to check. That is the scale length. So I want to have this bridge situated there. Then drilling up pilot holes. Before I do, no, I don't need to hold the bridge in place. But I just wanted to make sure. And don't need to drill those too deep because, again, it is pine after all. So, first things first, I'm going to need a ground wire. Now, due to some issues with the neck, I'm having to use a small plate underneath the bridge, but that is no matter because as long as I have the ground wire making contact with the metal part of the bridge, I'll be just fine. One more check. Perfect. All right. Just making a little bit of room for the screws to go in. Feels sturdy. Given that this was a budget bridge, feels surprisingly sturdy. Now, if the body wood would be a bit harder, I would use a little bit of wax on the screws just to help them go in a little bit better, because you don't want to force screws to go in, because then they're more than likely prone to break inside, and that would be an inconvenient thing to happen. There we are. Tugging on that, it is not moving anywhere, so I feel pretty good about that. Passing the ground wire through to the main control cavity. Now I've already test fitted the nut and it seems to be sitting very well. So now I'm using a half cut pencil that just sits on top of the frets, and this gives me a line onto where to cut the nut slots. So let's see if I actually need to do any work on this still. And by the looks of it, it's damn near perfect. Good, great. But it is a horrible plasticky nut, so it has a lot of sharp edges. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some sandpaper, just some 320, and I'm gonna get rid of all those sharp edges because you don't want any of those on your instrument. At the same time, kind of gonna make this a little bit less plastic looking by just sanding it down ever so slightly, getting that shiny plastic feel off. Definitely the front side of the nut definitely looks cheap, so want to get rid of all that, make it all a nice uniform, somewhat satin color. Now I'm also going to work in a little bit of bevel to the front, but I'm only going to do that once I actually have it installed because it's easier. Now when it comes to installing a nut, you only really need one drop of super glue. You don't want to overdo it. Come on. Okay, I finally got a drop out. So easing it in, making sure it's centered. Now being very careful on the fretboard side because I don't want to change my intonation point. I just want to get rid of all those nasty, hard edges. All right. I do not like plastic nuts at all, but let's give it a little bit of a... That's already a bit better. Looks more graphite-y now. All right, moving onwards. All right, moving onwards. I'm just gonna put on a light here, make sure that I'm not overexposed, which I slightly am. Time to install the tuners. Fortunately, I've been smart and I have drilled out and marked out the holes for the screws beforehand. So it's now quite literally just a matter of placing everything. But yeah, as I probably mentioned when I did that the key thing really is to use a straight edge or a ruler to kind of line up everything. That makes everything just look a hell of a lot nicer. Now again, no need to use wax or anything like that putting these in because we're working with pine and it's a very soft material, so they're going in very nicely. This is one of the things that irritates me a lot, is when people forget to take off the plastic from the back of the machine heads. So I'm doing that already at this stage. It is so cool to finally see this come together. The black hardware was definitely a good choice for the build, as was the red color. They matched very well. Who would have thought? Red and black working well together. That is heavy sarcasm right there, if you didn't catch that. I do very well know that red and black work very well together. And then the other side. Now, I never remember whether I have the right size socket for this. Turns out I do. Ah, clumsy me. Seriously, it's one of those days where nothing is staying in my hands. It is fairly annoying. Seriously, I can't wait to string this up and finally hear what it sounds like and whether it will actually work or not. All right, that is the tuners on. Time to do some electronics. That sounded very American. First and foremost, I need to fix that so that it is the right size. 7.71, so 8 mil. I already have my pilot hole drilled, so I'm just gonna go ahead and now, one thing that really sucks is the fact that I did not have any aluminum tape, which is usually what I use for shielding. So I will have to go back and do up the shielding a little bit more. Currently it has none of that, and I can't have none of that. It will need to have shielding. Granted, if it sounds granted, if the guitar sounds like it doesn't need shielding, then great, but I have my doubts when it comes to that. All right, moving on. Okay, now in order for the pickup to actually sit in place, I need to drill some holes right about here, just because the screws are, well, they're gonna get stuck on the bottom of the pickup cavity there, so I need to make some room for them. I forgot to take that into account when routing out the cavities, but just a couple of very small holes. Or a couple of shallow holes, I should say. Should do the trick very nicely. That will do just fine. There we go. And now we're gonna move on to the electronics. So I'm gonna push through the wire for the pickup, but I'm not gonna actually screw it in just yet, because I like to leave that as the very last thing, because there is a little bit of wiggle room here. And seeing as it is rather far away from the bridge, I want to get strings on first, and then once the strings are on, align the pull pieces according to those strings. So let's flip this around and get started on electronics. It's just too short, so I'm gonna have to go with blue. So that's my pickup, that's my bridge ground, the orange one. Yellow it is for the live. Try and make that roughly the same length as the ground. Don't have to, but might as well. There we go. I don't need the pickup wire to be that long, but I'm not gonna go shortening it. Looks like it's already pre-soldered. These wires are, yeah, not the greatest looking things. Guess I have to double back a little bit. But the main thing that you want to do is pre-solder all your wire. So that's going to be the live. So yeah, you want to pre-solder all the ends of your wires. So first, taking off the plastic on the top, like so. And I would recommend having some form of something to cover up your guitar so you don't damage it while you do this. But yeah, a little bit of solder on the iron. And then basically pass the wire in between the solder and your iron to get the ends covered. And the reason for doing this is just, quite honestly, to make your life a hell of a lot easier. Let's see, I already dropped some. Those have been done. I also really need to get a new tip for my iron. Looks like it has seen some action through the years. Bam. Pre-soldering wire actually makes things so much easier in the long run, because you don't need to worry about solder not sticking or trying to get solder to stick onto your wires or any surfaces at all. This makes that 10 times easier. Those are going to pop right off, so that's all good. Now, first and foremost, grounding point. Now, what I usually like to do is not have wires, or it's a good method to not have every ground point in the same lump. So now that I have the bridge ground there, I'm not going to ground everything else to that point as well. Before you ask, yes, I am using a little bit of a diagram in the background there, just because wiring is not my strong suit. For years, I hated it, and I had other people do it for me. But I have grown to not necessarily like it, but more, I guess, be okay with it. So I'm not going to use the same grounding point. You can ground this separately. This isn't a necessary thing you have to do. I just find that it makes life easier when you're doing maintenance, for if you need to figure out where there's an issue. If there is an issue, that is. Makes troubleshooting a hell of a lot easier and faster. Well, you don't need to figure out, or don't need to unsolder the whole lot. Wonder which way I want to do this so that it makes sense. Probably like so. So I'll do the output first. You also want to be very careful not to overheat your pots at any point. There you go, that's nice and stable. So that is my bridge, or that is my output now. My output live. Now I'm going to put in yet another ground wire. I'm going to have that run parallel to the output there. Looks a little bit neater. And then move those aside. And then finally, not finally, but there. That's the pickup ground. Now I always give a tug to every joint to see that they're good. This is definitely not the cleanest wiring job that I've done, but it does do the trick. There you go. Now, no matter how many times I do this, I always do this wrong. Or I wire the jack the wrong way around. Ground. And then, last but not least, the live. Now, just making sure our bridge pickup doesn't fall out. I'm not going to put the soldering iron away just yet because I need to test the electronics. That's not going anywhere, so I don't have to worry about that right now. So, one of the key things to remember, this is a thing that I've learned, is never, ever put the back plate on until you're strung up and the electronics are working. Because 9 times out of 10, when you have done the electronics and put the back plate on, string things up, there's something that has gone wrong. I say 9 times out of 10, but I'm just saying very often that might be the case. So, all right, let's string this up. This is where it gets really exciting because we're nearing the end. I'm putting 10s on this, while I could have very easily put 9s on. I don't like 9-gauge strings. They don't feel like anything. So instead, putting on 10s for a little bit more added comfort. Hopefully this thing doesn't implode on me. So I don't know if you saw that there, but when I have a bridge like this, I usually bend the end of the string just a little bit, and this helps me get the string underneath and into the bridge. Or underneath the saddle and going through where I want it to. Instead of having to poke around for a little bit. And then on this end, usually do a couple of loops around. And then through. And then tight. There is sound. There is sound, but it is very weak sound right now, because I notice that those two saddles are sitting pretty low. So let me fix that up real quick. It's catching a little bit. So, see what I can do about that. That feels very tight, so I'm going to open that up a bit. That busted up neck angle really is being a pest right about now. Well, the good sign is that it hasn't exploded yet. I think I might have to raise the nut just a smidge. I get a very good 22nd fret. Sounding very good, but yeah, the rest need a little bit of work. Nothing a little setup and intonation can't fix. Hopefully. bridge alignment wise, that seems to be my best bet. Didn't even need a pilot hole for that. It went in very nicely, actually. So let's do the rest. I have a feeling I might need to take the bridge up as far as it will go for now. And then later on, see if I actually need to see if I need to make any adjustments. Oh yeah, that makes a huge difference. So let me fiddle around with this for a little bit, and then we'll come back to it.